Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. On this week's episode, I, Aaron Gerke, and Kevin Bender are engaging in a conversation, about a lot of different things. We talk about relationships, marriage, parenthood, and how all of those things give us the opportunity to live as Christ and put His love into practice. And we also have a conversation about how quick and easy it is to put up walls of division, hostility between us and other people, but how Jesus has actually torn those things down and given us the opportunity to live in hope and to invite other people into a life of hope. We hope that this conversation is encouraging and challenging and practical to you. Take something from it and apply it in your own lives. We really hope you enjoy it. Morning, Kevin.
Hey, morning, Aaron.
How's it going?
You know, it's going all right.
That's great. I wish that the people could see your foot apparel today.
Well, I can show them. I'm rocking the Chacos, but also with gray socks because my feet get cold.
Tell me about this style that you have. Socks and sandals.
Yeah.
Did you invent this?
No. In the 90s, maybe early 2000s, there was a show called Rocket Power. It's a cartoon about skateboarders.
Okay.
Uh-huh. And it's a pretty sweet show if you were a kid in the 90s like me. And anyways, there's some nerdy kid who moves in to the group. They call him Squid. That's his nickname.
Okay.
And he wears socks and sandals. And they make fun of him for it. They call him a shoebie.
A shoebie?
A shoebie.
Okay.
Someone who wears socks and sandals.
Huh.
But I thought it was sweet style. So I'm trying to, I just want...
Just since the 90s, you've just been like, I'm doing socks and sandals.
I'm a shoebie.
Wow.
No, not since then. I never wore socks with sandals till I moved up to this brutally cold place called the Upper Peninsula.
Really?
Yeah, the summer's just frigid, man.
It's been brutally hot. I don't know, Kevin. You are a man of your own. But hey, congratulations for, the boldness of wearing socks with sandals.
Thanks. I'm waiting for it to catch on one of these days.
That's a confidence thing.
How are you, man?
I'm well. I'm doing well. Yeah, we didn't do a podcast last week, so to our faithful listeners, I know you're just waiting around for these things, and we were both out of town, going in all kinds of different directions. So this summer has been a little bit nutty in that way. You and I have been. I mean, we've been here at the same time, but then we've not really. So it's been a good summer, but just kind of wild in a lot of ways. This last week, my family and I we were at Camp Luther. That's our North Wisconsin district. That's the part of the denomination that we're in, our region. Our district supported Camp Luther in 3 Lakes, Wisconsin. So I've been privileged to be able to serve as a guest pastor there for a number of years now. So we were hanging out down there, and it's like, I don't know, I'd probably say like a 90-10 split between work and play. So probably like 10% work and like 90% play. So we do a Bible study and that kind of stuff each day, but most of the time it's just family hanging out as part of the family camp. And so it was a good time away. And I think just mentally, emotionally, like for me and my family, right before we left for camp. And I mentioned it, I don't know when people listen to this podcast, or maybe nobody listens to this podcast. I don't know, Kevin. No, people do. But when Kevin and I were both gone, we did a pre-recorded sermon where you had your little finger of Ezra guy, and in that sermon I mentioned that my dog was really sick.
That's right.
And we didn't know how things were going to pan out. So when we were recording that, it was that morning that she was not doing well at all, and I brought her to the vet and almost had made a decision. Before recording that, I was almost going to make the decision to put her down then, but we decided to maybe try a treatment and give her a night at the clinic to see if she would get better. And then I got a call the next morning that she had actually died there. So we had, so that was a more of an emotional deal than I probably expected it to be, because I had kind of thought that the dog was, I mean, she was getting old and was having a harder time getting around and stuff, but it ended up probably being a blessing in the end, even though it's a difficult thing, but the timing of it all, because we're also, like right now, as we're recording this, we're like maybe a week, 2 weeks away from our fourth child being born. And so, like, between grieving the death of the dog and the upcoming, expectation of a baby, there's just a lot, I think, maybe more going on in my head and heart than I even know. And so just being away for that week, just being as family and relaxing and hanging out with friends was super good. So yeah, so coming back now and re-entering, we're just waiting around for kid to be born, So that's kind of where
it's exciting,
kind of where we're at. But you were doing some traveling too, right?
Yeah. So when we recorded, that was on a Monday, I think. Yeah, for the sermon that following Sunday. That was the same day that my family, we headed down to Milwaukee that evening, crashed at my parents' house, and flew out to Colorado the next day on that Tuesday. And it was a really fun trip. The reason we were going out to Colorado was for my middle brother, Patrick, getting married to now his wife, Lindsay, who we actually had only met for the first time at my other brother's wedding like a month before.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's just you get older and, as you start moving in your different directions, and of course him living in Colorado and me living out here, it's kind of few and far between we get these times together. But yeah, so his wedding took us out there, but we had plenty of time in advance before the wedding to kind of hang out as family too. Yeah. Since we were traveling so far for the wedding, we figured, let's just stretch it out. Yeah. Enjoy some time, just Molly, Lily, and I. Yeah. And then a little bit of time when the rest of my family came in. So, yeah, we walked around some old stomping grounds because both Molly and I had lived in Colorado.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Molly for longer than me, and so we went and visited kind of where she used to work at a home for single mothers. Kind of a care ministry put out by the Wells Church, actually. Oh, okay. So another Lutheran denomination, but Wisconsin Synod, a little more conservative than the LCMS. So it was a neat ministry, and we popped over where they used to be. They actually weren't able to keep the funding for that site. They moved it closer to their headquarters in Wisconsin.
Okay. So Molly was a social worker there or something like
So
it?
Not at that time. That's what inspired her to become a social worker.
Okay.
Yeah. So she worked, it was basically, they would take in any mother who was pregnant or had just had a baby under a year. They would set them up free housing. They would try and help them fill out resumes, get jobs, shuttle them to and from work, basically give them a sense of, like responsibility, ownership, structure to their life where there really hadn't been. Right. And Molly, she loved the work, but she felt like, oh my gosh, I need more equipping, in this field. I just don't feel like I know what I'm doing. Right. So she loved the work, but wanted to grow more in it. So that's what led her to St. Louis to get her MSW, Master's in Social Work. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So so did that. Climbed a mountain. We did a hike. It was like a mile. We didn't go onto a peak. We were in the mountains. Yes. And then hung out with lots of extended family. So
very cool.
Really good. Yeah, kind of tied in, I suppose, with the whole, that sermon with Ezra when we were gone.
Oh, that's right.
Had a lot to do with relationships mattering.
Yeah.
Right. So even you talking about, your Bauer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
the
your
dog.
dog.
Yeah.
Like even that relationship mattered, right?
Yeah.
I think. And you even mentioned that in the sermon, didn't you?
Yeah. Right. I mean, you think about the relationships that we have in life. Like those are real things, real places that God gives to us to put into practice His kind of love for us. I mean, obviously, mostly we see that taking place in marriage, where the Bible speaks very clearly about a marriage being like the place where husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church, laying life down for her, and wives submit to your husbands as the church submits to Christ. And all of these things. Husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husbands. And I mean, that's in the book of Ephesians. So in that marriage, we actually put into practice the kind of love and the kind of forgiveness that we've received. And we experience it and we do it, like we live it out. So mostly in a marriage, but that can be applied to every relationship here on earth that we have with people. Like, you just stop and think, like, why? I don't know. Maybe this is too heady or too big of a topic, but out of the billions of people in the world, you know, God has got you where you are. You were born into a family. You live in a neighborhood. You work in a certain place. You're engaged in common interests with people around you. Like, why? Why do you have those people in your life? It is to put into practice and live out the kind of love that God has for you. So, I mean, relationships matter as you give, but also as hopefully as you receive, and that you're surrounded by people who build you up, who remind you of who you are as a child of God, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, the relationships, they matter. That's huge.
Yeah, significantly. You know, as you talk about putting into kind of practice the love that God shows us, it just made me think of, there was a pastor I once heard talk about, you know, you can be told that you're loved by God, or you can be told that you're a sinner, you know, but you really don't know it in your bones until you've been shown the love of God, or been shown, you know, that you're, you know, you can't do it all, you know, that you're a sinner, that you need God, right? And so, you know, kind of on that front end, on the being shown the love of God, I think you're right that God, He places us in these various roles exactly for that reason, right? To show His love, to really manifest His love, the love that we know from Him, to the other people that He's placed with us.
Right.
And you mentioned the marital relationship, but it's kind of interesting even thinking, because I think there are these kind of separate zones and almost like tiers of love. So you got the marriage, which is kind of that fundamental picture of Jesus in the church, right? His bride. But in the scriptures, you also have, I think the next level would be like parents, you know? So like marital love is one love, maybe I don't know, I'd say it's the highest, but it's a pretty significant one.
Yeah.
But then you have parental love, you know, raising your kids. And in the scriptures, you hear all sorts of language about us being children of God, you know, sons and daughters of God, He being our Father.
Well, I mean, I think just even, like you said, like that pastor said, you don't really know the love of God till you've received it or whatever. But I mean, definitely as a married couple, like we've had to learn how to, with my wife, like how to forgive, and actually speak forgiveness to one another, and try to put that in alignment. But being a father also of my children, I mean, so much more resonates with me what it means that God is a father, you know, and even if there's if there's discipline, you know, there's love and there's grace and there's mercy, but there's also like shaping and forming, but this unending love. Like I will always be a child of God.
Right.
Like that's His promise to me. He'll never leave me nor forsake me. And I mean, I feel that same way about my kids, you know, and I'm an imperfect father. So like, that's where, I mean, God is perfect. So I know that in my imperfection, like where I'm lacking and where God is perfect, but that helps me also understand His perfect love for me when I realize like my quick frustration or whatever with my children when there's, you know, repeated misbehavior or whatever, you know. I mean, my two oldest kids, they share a room, and even last night, like, and this is a repeated thing, almost every single night, like, we tuck them into bed, they're allowed to, like, read for a little while until we tell them, okay, like, read on their own, until we tell them, okay, it's time to go to bed, turn off the lights, and then they do that, and then it's usually, a good 30, 45 minutes, an hour of, like, going back and forth and telling them, guys, if we said go to bed, we said go to bed. We said, like, go to bed. Go to bed. Just go to bed. You know we do this every night. Go to bed. You know? I don't know, like last night, I didn't get like mad at them, but I had to speak because it's just so repeated, and I'm trying to learn to be slow to anger and not get mad at them, but I had to speak with a stern voice finally. You know, I'm like, guys, seriously, go to bed, I mean, it's not even that big of a deal. Like,
Right.
we're just talking about a natural thing, like going to sleep. But as a father, it's like, all right, I mean, I don't know. Does that resonate?
Oh, it does completely. I remember when I was younger and I used to read or hear, in Scripture about it talking, and this in the Old Testament, right? That God is slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. And then you read the part where like the earth rips open and a bunch of people fall in and get, like obliterated. And I'm like, is he really slow to anger? Like, is that really, like the reality of God? But yeah, like you said, when you become a father, you realize, oh man, yeah, God is really slow to anger.
Yeah.
Because like,
he could be mad. He could be like super mad with us every single minute, and he.
Yeah, the fact that the earth still hasn't ripped open in my life, and I haven't been sucked under, like, he like he really is patient with us, and he's so tender when he comes to growing us, but he does grow us, and sometimes it is hard. I mean, I think all of us can resonate with a time we've kind of been like, what the heck, God, like why is this happening to me, God? But when you become a father, you realize, oh yeah, sometimes you have to do things. Your kids might not want to go to bed right now, but you know what's best for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so even if it's a little, and like you said, this is a minor example, but maybe it's a little painful for them, right?
Yeah.
To have to like, I guess I have to shut my eyes. I don't want to.
Yeah.
But it's good for them.
Yeah.
And so, we start to see more who this God is in these various relationships that he places us into.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I think finally, too, friend.
Right.
Jesus, what does he say to the disciples? Master doesn't tell his servants, right, what's going on, but I've told you, like I am your friend.
Yeah.
I call you friend. That's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Like Jesus is Lord. He's God.
Yeah.
He's the one that no one could even be around before Jesus came to earth, without being just obliterated. And here he is, and he's befriending these people. He's confiding in them. He's sharing what his Father has shared with him. And he calls them friends. He calls us friends.
Right. Greater love has no one than this, that a man should lay down his life for his friends. Right?
Yeah.
And you are my friends. He said, you are my friends if you do what I command. He does.
Sure.
So that, I mean, that sounds like a bit conditional, but it's also like, it's just an obedience thing, like, I don't know. I mean, true friends do make an agreement to live a certain kind of way, like you're not just going to totally disrespect your friend. Like a friend would do what a friend asks them to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
exactly.
I don't know.
Like, I mean, I think about like going out and, buying a beer for your buddy,
Yeah.
right? Well, if they buy you a beer every time you go out and you never buy them a beer, like it starts to become a question. Like, are we really, like, is this a mutual thing?
Yeah.
Like, are we actually friends,
Yeah.
But like Jesus laid down his life for us.
Have you ever bought me a beer? Just kidding.
I don't think I have.
Well, here we go.
We're just coworkers now. Yeah. So, but I mean, no matter where your relationships are at, whether you're a husband or wife, a son or father or daughter or mother, or just a friend, like in all of those spaces, you have opportunity to demonstrate the same love that God is demonstrating to you.
Right. It's so. I don't know what adjective it is, but it happens so quickly in this sinful, broken world. How quick relationships can be severed, though, too, and how quick we are to not want to work at living in the kind of love and forgiveness Jesus has given to us. This last Sunday, I preached about. I mean, we haven't even mentioned the guys in this podcast, but that's fine. We're preaching through Ezra and Nehemiah, and
That's right.
we turned into the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is this guy who, in the Old Testament, goes back to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. They've been knocked down, and so that's his goal. And they do rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days. But in my sermon, I was trying to draw some practical applications to this. I don't know. It's just interesting because the whole idea of these practical walls of like a city wall of Jerusalem have become such a politicized thing in the news and like in our world.
Sure, yeah.
And that was, I don't know if anybody's minds went there when I was preaching. I'm sure somebody did, but you know, when it's very politicized about building a wall on our southern border, whether you're for that or against that, or what the purpose of that is. I mean, I just heard on the news on the way here that like Turkey is one of the country of Turkey is taking in a lot of refugees. They took in a lot from Syria during that conflict, and there's a lot of people from Afghanistan like traveling through Iran to try to get to Turkey, and so Turkey is welcoming in Afghanis, but what they said in the news is they're also accelerating the extension of a wall with the border with Iran, because that's the route that Afghanis take, so they're going to try to control all that.
Yep.
So there's a lot of like, I don't know, in our hearts and minds, like how do we treat immigrants and refugees and
right.
like, I don't know, I didn't really want to go there totally in my sermon.
Yeah.
So I tried to take a broad scope at this and just talked about like walls of hostility and walls of hope. So I was just saying it's so in our lives though, how quick we are to build up these walls of hostility towards other people. You know, we do it. Unfortunately, we do it a lot in our sin. We're like, I don't want to see from that person. I mean, I mentioned in my sermon, like on social media and stuff too. And I've done this where like somebody's annoying or saying stuff that I don't want to see, and I'm just like, I'll just block them. Like blocks, you know, like building blocks of a wall. It's just like block. I don't want to. I just want to be happy. I don't want to notice any of this stuff. I don't want to deal with you. You know.
Yeah.
So that's easy to do, like, you know, on social media, but a lot of people do that in life as well. And I mean, yeah, on that same news story I was listening to about like with the Afghani refugees like heading to Turkey, they on the news they interviewed somebody from Turkey, and they were just saying like there's a lot of hostility there between like locals now and these refugees, and they don't see them as, they see them as a threat. They consider them criminals and all this stuff, and you're like, yeah, those are walls of hostility. You know, just between people groups and all this kind of stuff. So it just happens so much in this world where we just divide. You know.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about sin in the past being this thing that separates, right? And that's kind of like Satan's work. That's kind of his aim. Let me separate people. Let me separate God and man too, right? And get you thinking that God's kind of out to get you, or that there's hostility there still, right? Which Jesus in Ephesians very clearly came and knocked down that wall. But yeah, even thinking about my own life, my own history, I can think of like very specific people, you know, from childhood, you know, into adolescence. At least for me, like those seem to be years where I was maybe a little less, I don't know, thoughtful about my behavior, you know, or words, or maybe just like more. It's easy to respond emotionally when things happen. But yeah, you know. You make a dumb decision that like practically hurts another person, and they don't want to have anything to do with you, right? And that's a wall of hostility. Or, you know, there was a time when, honestly, it was a friend was doing a friendly gesture to me, but I was embarrassed by it, right? Like in middle school, so he gifted me this action figure of a TV show that was kind of niche. It was called Gundam Wing. It's kind of anime-ish.
That's the second cartoon you've referenced today, but go on.
Yeah, man, if I hit 3, dude, that'd be a good episode. Gundam Wing, check it out. Great show. But when I was in 8th grade, I was embarrassed to admit that in front of the whole classroom. So it was kind of a thing that me and my friend Logan Chaplowski was his name. We played together all the time at my house, but I never talked about it with anyone else. And then at like a Secret Santa kind of exchange, she gifted me this action figure. And like I did that gander around the room kind of thing, right? As I opened it, and I saw that like there were like kids kind of snickering, and I mean, who's to even say it was about what was going on? Maybe they had an inside joke that was not even related, but I was embarrassed about it. And instead of being a friend to Logan, I totally betrayed him.
Really?
You know, just was like basically was like, oh, this is like I criticized the gift. You know, right? That's horrible. I mean,
yeah.
this is a real Peter moment for me.
Yeah.
And like, I can tell the story now without like getting like too emotional about it, but only because there's been a few times prior to now that I've shared this story where like it really ate me up. Like I needed to be forgiven of this, and thankfully I've had people in my life who have spoken God's forgiveness to me.
Yeah.
But the other piece of it is that there's always opportunity for repair work too.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
There was some sermon I did on friendship where I said, a friend is always there for you and will never let you down.
Yeah.
And I talked to somebody after, and long story short, kind of the feedback was, we do let each other down.
Yeah.
Like this is the reality, and we've seen this in Ezra and Nehemiah,
Yeah.
right? They kind of things are going good, and there's like, oh well, shoot, that wasn't quite the way we wanted it.
Right.
There's kind of a letdown at the end of the Zerubbabel story, the end of the Ezra story with the divorce piece we talked about a week ago. And but anyways, there's room for repair. We call that reconciliation, right? So coming back together, basically letting those walls get knocked down.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think repent of those walls. Admit our faults, ask for forgiveness, and that's kind of our part. Right. Or maybe you're on the other side and you're the one that's been hurt, and maybe that person comes and speaks their sorriness about it. Or maybe you find even the room to address it and say, look, like I know this happened, but I want you to know, like there's forgiveness. Yeah. Like I still want to repair the relationship.
Right. Well, that's where that's where I use this image, these walls of hope, and I don't know, it felt a little bit weird to say like God builds walls. It feels like what? But I meant, it's true. Like God protects us, God guards us, God does hedge walls of protection around us to keep the evil one at bay, to lead us not into temptation. Like He does all the time. A lot of times we step out of bounds, and we're like, whatever.
Fence.
Yeah, but he does, and he does it collectively as well. And I said, like the walls God builds are not designed to keep people out, but to invite them in, that more people can experience the hope of Jesus Christ. And I think that is true, right? So when we can live lives knowing that all of these whatever opponents or whatever hostilities or whatever brokenness we encounter in this world, when we know that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, those things have no eternal power over us, that's what it means to live in hope, hope of the resurrection, hope of what is to come. Then we can live lives saying, man, throw what you want at me, like I will still love you, treat me horribly and I will still give you grace, like to be that vulnerable and that humble in this world, but that's who Christ was. Right? That's what Christ did. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Like took on our suffering. Like, so when we align ourselves with that, it's just like, when the world's going to throw a bunch of stuff at us, I don't need to be hostile. Like, I can be filled with hope, knowing that all of that hostility won't last forever,
Right.
So, and God builds that in us. Like, He gives us this hope. He gives us this peace. He gives us joy, love, right? So, and that's where, like, invite others into that, right?
Yeah.
Invite others into that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Walls aren't bad in and of themselves. They aren't.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's just what are they there for?
Right.
What's the purpose of them? What's the intent?
Right.
So, yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Cool. This has been a great conversation, Kevin.
Yeah, it's good to be back, man.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff coming up as we head into our fall season here. I think we're going to keep this podcast going, and sometimes it's very directly tied into the sermon. Sometimes we go all over the place. Sometimes we do interviews with other people, and I think we're just going to, hopefully that's working for you guys, and we're going to stick with that same format and, sometimes surprise you with something a little different. And anyways, Kevin, as always, it's good to be with you here today.
Yeah, likewise, Aaron. Great
Take
to
care.
see you.